Welcome to the School Sucks podcast. I'm your host, Mike. And if you are new here, the School Sucks podcast is a place where we have conversations about reinventing, reorganizing, and rethinking education so that no kid ever has to say school sucks ever again. So you'll hear raw, authentic conversations with some bold ideas about what to do with school, maybe some things you've never heard of, maybe some things you hate, maybe some things you love, but there's always going to be a fresh and real conversation. Today, we have the privilege of having a guest, which I know that a lot of people love. I've been getting a lot of requests for guests. I've been getting a lot of referrals for guests. But this is a good friend of mine that I'm excited to have on the show. Her name is Jennifer Richmond. Jennifer is the founder of The Truth in Between, and she's the executive director of this amazing organization called House United Academy, and is on the board for an organization called Better Angels. And we will talk about all of those probably during the show. But one of the things that you can think of, like the theme of this show, is all about education through communication. As we've seen recently with the presidential debates, regardless of the fall politically, I think we can all agree that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are terrible communicators at this point, or at least they showed us some terrible communication skills. So we might break that down. We might get into that, but we are definitely going to talk about education through communication and what that looks like. So let's welcome Jennifer to the show. Jennifer, welcome. So happy that you're here.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's a good timing when we're talking about communication, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the best timing possible. I was watching the debate, and everyone's like, "This is why you need debate teachers." I was like, "I teach debate." So it's like, it's like perfect timing to have you on.
Well, and that's jumping right in. I mean, the debate is the big thing that I think that we're missing in education, all around. And honestly, I have to tell you, I didn't do debate when I was younger. It's only as I got older that I realized how incredibly valuable it is. And one of the things is that we're not teaching debate, but we're really not teaching civics anymore.
Right.
And I think that those two together must be mandatory in, as early as possible, as early as kids can start to formulate, these ideas, because that is truly the way that we understand another side. That is truly the way that we learn how to communicate. And I think not only in a civics class, but I mean, debate should be kind of baked in to almost all of our classes where they can, because that is, it's project-based learning, right? Because you've got the kids and they're, getting excited and they're doing their own research. So that really kind of jazzes up a classroom. But then it's also, like I said, it's really, there's no better way to teach someone how about another side until they have to argue.
Absolutely.
For that other side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like it's one of the best research tools, communication tools, critical thinking tools that you can use. It's almost, depending on how you do it, you can slice it to where debate's the total academic experience all rolled into one. And so, I'm fortunate for my background in speech and debate. So shout out to Mr. Martin, who forced me to do speech and debate in high school. And I fell in love with it. Let's jump into the interview. So first, tell us who you are, what you do.
Okay. Well, about 2 years ago, 2018, I noticed I'm a mother, and my son came home, and politics have been tough these past 4 years, and he was sounding like a Twitter feed, and he wasn't really making good arguments and couldn't debate his thoughts. And literally there was a voice in the back of my head and said, you need to stop as a mother, you need to sit down, and you need to help, and you need to write. And so on that day, literally Truth in Between was born. So my background is as an analyst. So writing, analyzing international events has been, my career. And for a while, I kind of took a break from that because, dealing with a lot of very sensitive and hot topics. So crises, terrorism, whatnot. And after dealing with that for almost a decade, day in, day out, I literally, when I changed careers, I stopped and I started like reading Stephen King novels for a couple years. I was
Yeah.
just like, I like just put my head in the sand. And then, and it wasn't until I heard my son talk like this that, I felt obligated as a teacher, as a mother, as
Yeah.
just a citizen to say we need to slow down. And I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things. I mean, there's the book Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and I think in our
Right.
current environment we're so used to thinking fast. Everything is so quick, and there's such a value to thinking slow. And so we started Truth in Between, and it started with my son and I writing on really tough issues, gun control, immigration, stuff like this together. And he, once school kind of got back into swing, he got busy and wouldn't really write with me. So I sought out other people,
Yeah.
and it became letters.
Mm.
And what I found the value in that is when you take the time, so this goes back to the thinking fast, thinking slow. When you take the time to actually write and sit down, there's a process with writing that really gives you more of a edge in critical thinking
Mm.
and processing information, as well
Yep.
as like reading, right?
Yep.
And so I started to engage people who thought differently than me to write letters. And it was so amazing to me to see the difference between doing this exercise versus getting on communicating over Twitter or Facebook or any of those other social media platforms was mind blowing. I mean, I don't think there was one instance of someone that I was writing with where we couldn't find some form of common ground.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it really was just that slowing down and being more thoughtful and mindful
Yeah.
of how we actually think, let alone how someone differently thinks,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yes.
interesting. I mean, that's true. Like writing is a great exercise, and I think it's a great human exercise, and it's one of the things that I appreciate about like having worked in schools for so long at this point. Like the written word is still and probably always will be super valuable in the school setting because of what you just said. Like process your own thoughts, but also other people.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I don't think we talked about, we sort of alluded to this. You talked about the international thing. How many countries have you been to? You've been a lot of places.
I want to say about 25
That's a
countries
lot.
I've traveled or worked at. I hear people go, I've been to 100 and whatever, 20, and I'm like, oh man. Then I go, I've only been to I love that. That's where, I mean, for me, that's life.
Yeah.
I started out real young, living in what was called Burma, now called Myanmar, and just understanding people of a completely different culture. And at that time, Myanmar was closed off to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Wow.
As if you were your State Department, you could get in, but otherwise, if I think the most a person could get was maybe a 1 week visa, and it was so hard that most people didn't come.
Wow.
And so I was truly, truly in a foreign land. I don't think that there's, now with the internet and travel, we've gotten so much closer, but this was
Yeah.
completely a mind-blowing experience for me. And that is what put me on the path of, realizing, okay, we are so full of differences that are amazing and wonderful. But there was so much that I found, despite this absolutely disparate environment, that we had in common,
Mm.
and a lot of that just came around like love of friends and love of family and love of
Yeah.
connection, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so when I started to see things going astray in the US, and then again with, really started to really, my son nailed that in with the way he was talking. I said, this isn't how we're not doing it right, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, and before I started Truth in Between, I worked internationally. I worked with a geopolitical intelligence firm called Stratfor, and then I went on to work with a venture capitalist firm that was doing a lot of
Nice.
work overseas. So my background is mostly in Asia
Hmm.
specifically.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that experience of like being overseas with valuing like spoken word and the written word and different perspectives, like it sounds like the combination of those things led to the Truth in Between. And I know that Truth in Between and House United Academy are sort of connected. So
Yeah.
tell us how are they connected?
So House United Movement, which was started by Alan Hilton, and he wrote a book. I actually have it right next to me.
Yeah. Shout out to
He
Alan.
came, yeah, shout out Alan. We'll show him this, House United. And I went and saw him speak, and I just went up to him and I said, your idea, he believed that we needed to, unity was his calling, and that we were failing miserably. And I said, hey, I'm kind of doing the same thing, but a little bit differently. I'm doing it with these letters. And we started to brainstorm, and he said to me, I remember sitting, he goes, where do you think we can make the biggest difference? And I said, in high school. High school, and well, K through 12 really, but
Yep.
high school, when we're talking about debate, I think that's where kids are most able to grasp the ideas of debate. But I
100%.
said high school, because right now in our polarization, we've got organizations like Braver Angels. They were Better Angels, they're now Braver Angels, that
Okay.
I'm a part of. Love it, and they're starting to get into college and high school. And here in Central Texas, I'm helping them with that, and I'm just ecstatic about that. But really, it was started out more as addressing polarization among adults.
Okay.
And then you've got the Heterodox Academy. Also love them, doing great work, but their focus was really on addressing polarization and viewpoint diversity in universities. And that was all reactive to me. I mean, we
Right.
need to teach this when the kids are younger. And that's, to me, that is how you make generational change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have to teach our kids now how to have these conversations, so that, I mean, I love that we've got Brave Angels, the Heterodox Academy, but I mean, almost where those things would become not obsolete, there's always going to be used, but, where it's like we've already taught our kids this,
Right.
where we're not backtracking, going, oh my God, what did we miss, with
Yeah.
our university kids? And now as adults, we can't even talk to each other. We
Yep.
miss something fundamental in the learning process, in the
Yeah.
teaching process.
Absolutely. I read this tweet and I can't remember who tweeted it, but it was somebody who I really respect, and it was during the presidential debate. And again, like, aside from politics, and this is what I loved about the tweet, is that it didn't say like, oh, the left sucks, or oh, the right sucks. He said, I'm so sad that a child is watching this right now thinking that this is what debate is. And it's so true, because last night, regardless, like, politics aside, just evaluation of the communication, when I watched the debate between two, like, one of these people is going to be essentially the leader of the free world, or the leader of our country. And I was like, oh, I've got so many places where I can coach y'all. Like, just let me talk to you. Like, attack the argument, not the person, right? It's like, right, like, find places of common ground. So let's talk. Let's dig into that. What are some things that you work with students on, inside of all of the work that you do, to help them communicate across differences?
Well, we're really just starting right now, so we're getting our feet wet. Don't have too much experience to share, but what we started out doing was just creating a curriculum with some of the hottest topics. So, for example, immigration was on that list. That's
Right.
always a hot topic. And what we have them do is, we also take into account that kids learn differently. Some
Yeah.
kids learn through hearing, some kids learn through, speaking, some writing, whatever. And so the curriculum that we designed allowed for debate, but it also allowed for kids who think differently to also get engaged. So some of that was, creating teams where some people were responsible more for the writing. Some people were
Love
responsible
that.
for the delivery. Some people were responsible for feedback. But the most important thing was that they had to flip. So if they were, say, on one debate in pro-immigration, then they had to flip the next time and be, not anti-immigration, but,
Right.
more,
The con.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that's really where we're at, is we're trying to make sure that we capture all types of learning, with providing opportunities for kids who might not feel like speaking, or that's not their strength, to still be involved in the debate process. And so the curriculum as we have it designed right now is about a semester long. What we would love to do is work with an organization like Generation Citizen, that is bringing civics into school, and have it be a year-long project that's mandatory. I mean, just as much as like English or history is mandatory, where
Yeah.
one semester is civics, and one semester then is learning this debate and learning how to communicate around the things that you learned in civics. So that's really where we're trying to take it. And meanwhile, we're working on doing, we know also trying to address all students and all kinds of learners. We know that we are living in an environment, though, that is different, and where spending long hours in the classroom is not always the way
Right.
to share ideas. And so we're also breaking up into like mini debates
Yeah.
as well, that are easily digestible, 5 to 10 minutes. I personally like the longer debates because I do like the work that goes into
Me
the
too.
debates, but we can still do that work and have smaller mini debates throughout,
Yeah.
where people are constantly or more frequently engaged.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I love is this commitment to public speaking that the school where I work, Alpha, that we have, and a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Elliot, he created a workshop this year that is modeled after the ESPN show Around the Horn. And I thought of this because you talked about like quick debates, and basically what he does, he gives kids like, he's like, okay, you got 30 seconds, so they have to go back
Yeah.
and they have to do their research, they have to show up with their research done. He gives them the topic, and he's like, 30 seconds, give me your point of view. Cool. Anybody have a rebuttal? And it's like speed debating,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
sometimes the kids are really stressed out, but they always walk away like deeply entrenched in these conversations because they're like, I didn't get to say this, so I'm gonna say this to you now. And like I'm watching them like just go to lunch, like talking about these topics, and I'm like, this is cool because
Yeah.
it's leaving them wanting more. And I think like for most teachers, I don't know if they realize that like debate's one of the most engaging things you can do in a classroom, like because kids love it. So what's some advice that you would have for a teacher who's maybe a teacher or even a parent at home who's like, I don't know if I want to engage my students with debate? Like, what advice would you have for them?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, it doesn't have to be formal debate,
Yeah.
but I think that we have to at least engage students in, at the very least, just conversation and dialogue.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest things that I don't think that we stop and ask a lot is why?
Yeah.
Why? And so when, someone says something outrageous or, something that you don't agree with, tell me why you think that way. So I've been listening to Urshad Manji's Note,
Yeah.
Don't Label Me. And one of
Yes.
the stories that I love is this story about her friend Genesis, who is a
Right.
singer. And this guy, I forgot the name, but he's, they're in Mississippi, and he has this love of this, the Mississippi flag. And obviously she has got some issues with that. But instead of getting in a debate and, Twitter or whatnot, she just simply sat down. She invited him into a conversation
Yep.
and asked, what does that mean to you? It wasn't accusatory, it wasn't shaming. Why is that important to you? And it gave him a chance where he didn't feel like he was attacked, to open up.
Yeah.
And then she could understand it, even though they still didn't agree. But because she allowed that opening, then when she spoke, he heard her.
Hmm.
And so I think in our classroom, a lot of times we we are so afraid of honest dialogue that we back off, or anything that seems contentious, political, race, anything right now that is a hot topic, instead of engaging and saying why, we just look the other way. And I think as teachers too, it's just, and honestly, Mike, what makes me sad is it's safer that way,
Yeah.
because everyone, has different points where they feel offended. And I think we need to get to a place, and this is hard, and this is why it needs to happen in high school, where we can, it's okay to be offended, but it's not okay to not share why,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we need to generate that type of understanding. And I think that we are too scared right now, because everything with, again, going back to like social media, there's so much offense there, and the
Yeah.
loudest voices are the ones that get elevated.
Right.
And so we're just scared. You hear of all these doxing and canceling and
Yeah.
whatnot. It's like, it's just safer just to shut up.
Hmm.
And as a result, we're not having those important conversations. So even if you aren't a debate teacher, or you're not to be teaching debate in class, I would encourage difficult conversations. And I think the way that you can do that, and do that with empathy and understanding, is to create some ground rules. So like
Yeah.
Braver Angels, for example, I mean, we go in there and there are ground rules before every debate, before every workshop.
Yeah.
of how we are going to interact.
Right.
And if we lay up those ground rules and know that everyone is coming in good faith, then when we ask the question why, I think that it is opens up more doors for communication and
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, I think the key to what you said is good faith, right? Like assume that like when you come to the debate table that you are on the same team trying to understand each other, right? In good faith. I think that's so great. That's a nugget for people to take home. The other thing is I'm going to definitely link Irshad's work in the show notes. And
Yeah.
I have not formally asked her yet, but she's going to be on this podcast at some point because the world needs to hear what she has to say.
She needs, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
More Urshad.
yes, like way more. But I think I think the thing that I think we can close with is to my audience, the world needs more people like Jennifer and like Irshad and like you who are listening to decide to just like look, it's okay to disagree. I used to have these debates that went on in class all the time, and kids were afraid to disagree with each other. And they would say to me, like, what if my friend doesn't like me anymore? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it's just an idea. Like you could be wrong about something. Why you shouldn't be afraid to be wrong, and you should not be afraid to disagree. It's okay to disagree. One of the things that I think is so interesting, and I used to be in this crowd, and this is the last question that I'll ask you. I used to be in the crowd of people that's like, if I don't like what somebody's posting online, I'm gonna block that person. And now I'm like, actually, no, I'm not. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna engage with them when it's appropriate.
Right.
And I'm not gonna do it in a DM. I'm gonna do it publicly and ask them, what do you mean by this? Like I want to, because my goal is to understand. So how do you think we can help in public, like even online, help orient and sort of guide other people to start thinking and acting that way, where we seek to understand and not just to be right?
Well, I mean, I think doing it on social media is tricky.
Yeah.
And I would, particularly if it's something very sensitive, I would actually reach out to someone in much the way the story, Urshad's story, where let's have this conversation where you actually are sitting down. Obviously, in this day and age, it might be in Zoom, but to the extent possible, even in person, because when you can look someone in the eyes, and see that they're not coming from a place of hatred or anger or whatnot, but more of a place of curiosity.
Right.
That is so incredibly important. And so I feel like social media, even if in good faith you were to publicly say, hey, can you tell me what you mean? Which I think that's great. I think more people should. But the problem is that then, a friend of yours might not, think, and then they just get piled on, and then there's this sense of pulling back. And again, then it really detracts from real conversation. So I would applaud asking people questions, in public spaces, but to the extent that it gets something where it becomes something that becomes uncomfortable, I would DM them. Can we meet? Can we have a coffee? Can we have? I'd love to hear your story because I'm not seeing where you're coming from. And I think social media is great for us keeping up in touch with our friends, but those conversations, and particularly in this day and age where we aren't having those conversations, I think we need to go back to basics. We need to go back to analog, whether that's in a letter or in a face-to-face conversation. And then we can jump back on, social media. But I feel like there's too much at stake for 280 characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Actually yesterday, I was having a discussion with two people on LinkedIn about, I forgot what we were talking about. About Jeff Bezos' school, which I think is a good idea, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. I know you do.
Yeah. We're on that. Yeah. There was two people I'm connected with. They're like, this is a horrible idea. One of those guys, we are in this network together that has a Slack channel. And one of the things that I so appreciated is that we actually took part of our discussion to the Slack channel, and then we were like, okay, that's where we did the hey, look, tell me exactly where you're coming from, so that when we go back to LinkedIn, we can model a healthy discussion for everyone. And exactly what you said. He lives in another state, so it was like we can't meet up in public, but it was the exact model that you just gave. It was like, look, we're having this public disagreement, and nobody's mad, nobody's offended, but we came, in a private channel. Look, here's how I grew up. Here's how you grew up. They're different. And then we came back, and literally I was so proud of the discussion because we were able to display unity online around ideas where we both disagree. Like he will never believe that Jeff Bezos' school is a good idea, and I think it's a good idea. So,
I love that. Let me tell you briefly what the one project that I'm working on right now is kind of a truth in between project. So I have a co-host for a podcast that I'm starting.
Yes.
And
what's it called?
It's going to be kind of funny. It's called Hold My Drink.
Yeah.
Because we want to model something like PBS with a beer, right? We want it to be intellectual and stimulating, but we want you to feel comfortable and relaxed and like you're sitting in our living room, right? But our image that we're working on is Lady Liberty with a beer because it's going to be politics.
Yeah.
So we're talking about politics. My co-host, different race, different gender, different political slant than me. And we are still great friends. And we sit there, like what we've been doing and leading up to actually, and we're hoping in the next week or two, I'll let you know when it's out, that it's out. We'll go over a news story, but then we are talking about really tough issues. And we spend hours before we actually get on the podcast going back and forth to find the meat of what our disagreement is and how we can resolve it before we actually take that to the screen. And so it's been such an amazing experience. And I love, I love talking to people I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I mean, and I call me crazy. I love it when I'm wrong about someone.
Yeah.
Like we need more good people in the world. So if I misjudge someone and it turns out that they're fabulous, like, yay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So, I'm really excited for that conversation, but it's modeling what you just said. I wanted to bring it up because we're doing all this backroom hashing out of what we're going to talk about so that we can model something that's really succinct, concise, but also civil and uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. So before we go, you mentioned the podcast. Tell people where they can find you online, where can they find more about you?
Okay. So my website is truthinbetween.com. And some of the stories are on Medium. You can also go onto the website, and I will link our podcast to that website when that comes up in the next couple of weeks. So most everything should be able to be found there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the School Sucks podcast. I had a blast talking with you, and I know there's like so many nuggets. I was like writing down notes and stuff like that. I was like, oh, show people. So many good things. Thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. It was fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk to you later, but I'm going to chat for just a second with our listeners, and then we'll both say goodbye. So if this is your first time, again, thank you for being with us on the School Sucks podcast. Obviously, I will drop all of Jennifer's links in the show notes and in the description so you can find her. If you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for watching. Definitely hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video. You'll see all the School Sucks content. The School Sucks podcast is, and we are a member of a network called the Rebel Teachers Podcast Network. So definitely check that out as well. And if you are listening on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you one more time, and I will see you on the next one.